All right, let's throw the college football playoff rankings on the screen here. Let's see how we want to do this. How about that? We'll just do that right there. hmm Um, all right. So you got obviously Oregon at number one. I have no qualms with Oregon at number one. Texas at number two. Guys, I implore you to go look at Texas's schedule and look at who they played, and you tell me what is Texas's best win this year. You know, I'm just, man, I'm just really don't understand what it seems like the committee this year is looking for just who has the least amount of losses, and that's it. Not who anybody's lost to or who anybody's beat or it's really kind of wild to me. And look, I've heard a lot of people talking over the last couple of days about, the college football playoff committee wants to hold up, the SEC or the Big Ten, or they're propping so and so up. I also, to those people, I implore you to go look at the list of the people that are on the college football playoff committee. Little to none of them are SEC coaches or members or anything like that. As you guys know, this isn't the same group of people every year. These are coaches and athletic directors and people associated with the sport from every corner of the country, from every different type of conference you can even think of. So don't tell me those people are trying to prop up the SEC or the Big Ten. That's not what this is about. Now, it doesn't mean that some of what they're doing isn't incorrect, because I don't think Texas deserves to be number two, Mason. I just really don't. Beating teams has to matter. Beating good teams has to matter in this sport. Why would anybody schedule anybody then? How about everybody just schedule a bunch of popcorn states? And I mean, I wish we were all as privileged to be able to play an ACC schedule and then just hop and skip to a conference championship game where you're playing SMU and then headed into the playoff. That's unbelievable. Here's my thing. So we got Ohio State at number two in the college football playoff rankings. We're going to figure out about Ohio State, guys. If they lose to Indiana this weekend, they're out. I think. Do you think? I don't think a two-loss Ohio State is going to be able to get in there. I mean, not with just the one win at Penn State and no conference championship game. I don't know. That'll be interesting to see how far that they fall out, because you just relying on the Penn State win at that point. Texas at number three. Everything I said about Texas still stands here. I had them. I was saying number two, but same thing applies at Texas at number three. I just don't see where the real good win is over Vanderbilt. Yeah, that's a good win. It's okay win. I'm not. But that's not the same as Georgia beating Tennessee and Texas this year. That's not the same as Oregon beating Ohio State this year. That's not, that's not even Notre Dame beating Texas A&M, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Penn State at number four. You guys let me know in the comment section who has Penn State beat that is worth the shit. Illinois. If Illinois is the best thing that you can come up with, then, I mean, so be it. But Penn State's not a contender, guys. They're not winning a national championship. It's not happening. Indiana. We'll see about Indiana. I mean, obviously, this is it. This is the big speed bump in the road for Indiana this weekend, and then they can worry about Oregon later on. But I think whether you win or lose to Oregon in the conference championship, if you win this weekend, you're in. No matter what. And Indiana may be in either way. What are your thoughts on that, Mason? I mean, what if we get to the end of this weekend and Oregon's got no losses, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana got one loss? I mean, what are we to do with that? Because here we are, and I talked to you about this before the video got going. Penn State's not playing anybody. So backing Penn State out of the top four is going to be really, really hard to do. They're going to have to do it because of the way the bracket's set up. And maybe that's what the college football playoff committee, how they're looking at it. But used to, when we did these college football playoff rankings, you had to be real careful getting a team too far up, because it was really, really hard to pull them back out of a top 10 or something like that. And Penn State is kind of in that scenario where they don't play anybody the rest of the season. So they're going to end up with one loss. the odds and all the odds makers and everything. I don't know what's going to happen in the Ohio State game this weekend, but all the odds makers and just about everybody I've seen is picking Ohio State in that game. So that's Ohio State with one loss with a win over Indiana, Indiana with one loss with a win over what's the best team you beat there? You'd have to fill in the blank for me because again, the Big Ten is Michigan was interwoven into everybody's schedule in the Big Ten, and Michigan has just been completely terrible. And so them terrible was unpredictable, but it was also kind of the demise of a lot of these big matchups and what a lot of what I thought was going to be trials and tribulations that was going to, compress a diamond in the Big Ten. When in all reality it turned out to just be Oregon playing Ohio State, and that's like the only matchup I can hardly even remember being a big one. And Ohio State, Penn State, I can't even remember another big matchup in the Big Ten this year, Mason. I really can't. And it's no wonder that over like twice the amount of people have watched the SEC rather than have watched the Big Ten this season. If you look at all the ratings and and on all that as far as viewership. So I don't know, man. At Georgia at 10, who thinks Georgia is the 10th best team in the country? Y'all let me know in the comment section. I really do want to know. I mean, maybe this is accurate. Maybe Georgia is the 10th best team in the country, but I don't know. I mean, Georgia already beat Texas, so I had several people tell me this week talking about our ranking, Mason, saying, well, so-and-so beat so-and-so. So how are they ranked ahead of them? Well, then explain this to me then. How is Texas ahead of Georgia with no good wins and a loss to Georgia? What are your thoughts on this? I could just keep going on and on, but the more I do it, the more it just gets me right off.
And this is kind of why I wanted to start the show off with the reaction here, because when we're doing our predictions, which are coming up here in a minute, I don't want to keep getting back to the playoff talk. Let's just let's let it all out. Let's unload the clip here, and then we'll get into the previews, because I think it's really easy when you're doing previews to talk about playoffs and implications, which you probably do need some of that. But yeah, I think this whole thing just needs to get blown up and redone. Our thought process on how to rank teams in college football is completely flawed. When you look at what the Big Ten has put on the field this year, it's terrible. Like you can sit here and tell me that the Big Ten is top heavy, and you'll have a little bit of an argument. However, when you look at the top teams, and let's just look at the 4 out of the top 5 that are on your screen here, how do you know that Indiana is one of the best teams in the Big Ten? Like, because they beat the 6 worst teams in the Big Ten handedly, does that make them one of the best teams in the Big Ten? Maybe so. But even if they are one of the best teams in the Big Ten, does that mean that they are the 5th best team in the country? And I think that that's obviously the bigger question here. When you compare the product on the field that the Big Ten has, and I'm using the Big Ten because the committee's telling us that 4 of the teams in the Big Ten are the top 5 teams in the country. But when you compare the schedules that these teams are playing with the ones that the SEC teams are playing, it's night and day difference. Like, you can look at the power index, you can look at records, strength of schedule, strength of record, all of that, and the SEC is above a lot of these teams, or a lot of the top teams in the SEC are above these teams in the Big Ten.
I want to say something while you're on that topic, and maybe give me your best answer, Mason. I'm not necessarily asking you; I'm asking everybody. But why in the hell is Missouri ranked 23rd, Mason?
Right.
Why? Well, and that's all those people that get really pissed about the SEC having teams in, and they say there's too many SEC teams, too many Big Ten teams. Missouri gives us a black eye because Missouri does not deserve to be in the top 25, guys. I'll be the first one to tell you. I mean, I'm not just like put all the SEC and Big Ten teams in there and then give all the other conferences 2 teams. I'm not about that. I want the best teams in there. I want the top 12 teams in there, the best 12 teams.
Well, and
doesn't
not
deserve to be in this ranking.
Yeah, and it's not to me it's not the best, it's the most deserving, right? Based on how you played. We can go power index all day long, and Carolina, South Carolina would probably be in the top 10 if we're just talking about who's the best team right now. Um, that's not what we're doing, right? And I think if that is what you're doing, if you are looking at power index, then yeah, Ohio State has a seat at the table. I think Indiana has a seat at the table. I legitimately think that Indiana is a top 10 team. I'm not. I see your comment, Indy Nation, and I'm not saying that Indiana is not a top 10 team in the country. I'm saying that their schedule is weak as hell, and you give them Georgia's schedule or Ole Miss's schedule or Alabama's schedule, and they're not undefeated. And I think that's where something's got to change here in how we judge these teams. Because right now, if we still had last year's format of the playoffs, you mean to tell me that Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State would be who plays in the playoffs this year? Like based off of what we've seen on film this year, that those are not the four best teams. Like it would be a terrible playoff. Um, I don't know, man. This
Indy
whole
Nation, I see what you're saying, Indy Nation too, and I get it. Look, Indiana, that has been the case with Indiana so far this year, but they're about to have a chance to prove it this weekend.
yeah.
So I
The
mean,
Indiana talk is over after this weekend. Like, especially,
absolutely.
I mean, obviously, if they win, my question is, and I like Indiana in this matchup, not necessarily to win, but I don't really know. I haven't decided where I'm going to lean yet on that. We'll get into the preview here in just a minute, but I do think that this will be a competitive game with Ohio State. So my question is, on the flip side, if Ohio State loses, are they out? Because then
Should be.
I mean, but so I guess the question is, if Ohio State loses, are they in? And would Indiana have a chance to stay in if they lose? Ohio State has the Penn State win, which if Penn State's the fourth best team in the country, it's a pretty nice win for Ohio State, right? So they probably are still going to be in. Indiana doesn't have that. There's not a win on their schedule that they can point to and say this is why we deserve to be in. You can say the eye test, kind of shows otherwise, and I kind of believe that they are better than some of these teams in the top 12, Miami in particular. I think they're better than Penn State. I wish that they would get a chance to play each other this year. They'd stand a pretty good chance against Notre Dame. There are a lot of teams that Indiana would be better than, but my point still stands. The schedules have to change, and the non-conference schedules have to change for some of these Big Ten teams. They need to be scheduling some tougher opponents year in and year out.
Yeah. Well, my biggest beef here, like I said, why is Penn State ahead of Indiana with a loss? That doesn't make any sense to me because Penn State and Indiana are in the same situation as far as wins go. They're in the exact same situation. They neither one has like beaten a big top 15 team. Indiana's got a chance to do that this weekend, and that's the difference. Indiana still has a chance to do it, and they're undefeated. Penn State already lost. They didn't score an offensive touchdown in their loss. It
Yeah,
wasn't a particularly close game, and it was at home. And so it's just, oh my gosh, it's just unbelievable.
yeah.
Penn State is the one that's stuck in my craw. Penn State and Texas.
Well,
You can
yeah.
make an
It,
argument for Ohio State. Here's the argument for Ohio State. I get it. Lost to Oregon at the very end of the game. Kind of crazy ending there.
on
Um,
the road.
on the road. Yeah, I get that. That was a valiant effort. And then you beat Penn State. All Ohio State could do that day to Penn State was beat them. And they didn't even allow them to score a touchdown. So, offensively, anyway, Penn State scored a defensive touchdown. But, Texas and Penn State, man, just stuck in my craw. A couple of teams that skipped around playing tough matchups all year. And I'm not saying they had a choice in the matter. I'm just telling you the facts and what it is. They haven't played nobody, and here they are getting rewarded for not playing anyone. And what message does this send to the rest of the country whenever you are scheduling out of conference football games? And who is the net loser on this situation? I'll tell you who's the loser. It's us, the viewer. We're the big loser in all of this. Teams like Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon. Why in the world would they go schedule big out of conference matchups with a college football playoff committee that isn't rewarding teams for getting good wins, but rather rewarding teams who sit in the corner and hope that nobody looks over their way? That's driving me nuts, man.
Yeah.
Mason, you talked about it. This is going to, we'll see how this works out. It's not over and done with. There's still going to be some moving around here, obviously. And the whole seeding aspect of this whole thing changes all of this, because as we just saw, Mason, we had the projections for the seeding and all that, and it kind of changes things up. So what you're looking at right now is going to be different just in the fact of the way things are seeded with conference champions and things. So there's still a lot of moving around to go on. Um, I just I'm interested to see how this goes, just like all of you are. Let us know in the comment section what you think.